من ابتدا مطالبی رو عرض میکنم که از من خواسته شده که به اون اشاره کنم. مطالب
I've been asked to speak about a very important question. I was born in 1972 in Tehran, and when I started school, it was in 79. And that coincided with the religious revolution under Mr. Khomeini. At that time, the schools had to close their doors. Everything had stopped in the country. And even though Islam was present at the time, nobody had really realized what this implied when an Islamic authority took power. And people were receptive to the promises made. They thought that there would be more well-being. They thought they would be better off. They thought they would have more political freedom. And that would be added to further freedoms. And therefore they supported the guide of the revolution. And the first thing that was done was to have the preceding government official, to have them step down, to have them either tortured or killed without trial. Now, my parents were civil servants under the preceding regime, and they were also sanctioned, and their lives were put in danger. But my father was able to convince them that they were wrong, and he saved all of our lives. People had to line up in a very harsh winter in order to buy basic staples. But they took to the streets to demonstrate. And our life was turned topsy-turvy. After a few months, schools opened again, but meanwhile everything had changed. I'd never seen such things before. The girls who had been part of our class before were separated. They were sent to a special school. Our teachers had to dress strangely, strange attire. They had to hide their hair, hide their bodies. A lot of the books changed as well. For example, the way they taught history. We had to learn Arabic, the Quran, and other Islamic subjects. And the life of Mr. Khomeini became compulsory as well. There was a very great change that the population was subjected to. People would disappear. And slowly, pressure built up to control people's opinion. If there was an ideology that anyone held that ran counter to Islam, that person was imprisoned or murdered. Now, I remember I was 8 years old and I had begun a political discussion with my music teacher. And I was expelled from my music class. But I was not discouraged. I felt I had a role to play in society. I tried to understand what was going on politically and socially in Iran. I would attend public events. I visited cemeteries. I visited hospitals. I went to conferences. I would talk with the mullah, the basiji, the different supporters of the regime. I was not afraid. I would strike a conversation up. I studied architecture and film, and I continued my work as a writer, as a poet. I wrote documentaries. I was a journalist and a photographer. But due to the pressure that was placed on people and on society, I wanted to reflect what was happening politically and socially through my poems, in my films, in everything I wrote. Now, I was threatened, I was censured, and I was arrested for short periods of time. And I realized that I wouldn't be able to continue my activities. So I focused more on nature and on history. But I still kept trying to take a short glance at politics. I studied different religions secretly, and then I decided to change religions. And now we're in 83 in Iran. When we talk about Neda Aga Sultan, when she was born, her father was a civil service and he was a musician. She was very intelligent. She was very honest. She was very sincere. She had a very sharp mind. She was an intellectual. She was well ahead of the times, and she was precocious for her age intellectually. I was impressed by her. She never got angry when people behaved badly. She became saddened by this. She was a deep thinker, and she was really a source of joy for all around her. We met on a trip. We struck up a conversation. We were talking about the beauty of nature and the creation that God had made. And we went on to talk about other points, and little by little things continued, and finally we decided to marry. She was an artist at heart. She was very curious about different religions, about the different visions that people held of different religions, and she decided to study for this reason theology. But after a while she realized the surface matters counted more at university rather than the reason for wanting to study. And she spent a lot of time talking with the management of the university about dress codes or superficial matters like this, and therefore she decided to drop her studies at university and study art as she wished. She enjoyed talking about the different pressures that were being placed now on Iranian society, above all young people. She suffered a great deal from these useless restrictions, and she felt this was part of superstition, that it was something from the Middle Ages. She suffered from the lack of freedom in society, and wondered why this had happened. She wondered why no one would react, why people didn't speak up and complain, explain their dissatisfaction. She wondered what the end result would be and what would end up happening. What marked her as being different from other people of generations was that she tried to find solutions. Not only did she raise questions. And then the presidential elections arrived, and at that point there was a campaign by the different candidates. And Neda rejected the regime. And she felt it wasn't a matter of individuals. She felt that all the candidates were more or less the same. In any case, she thought the people's vote didn't matter. It was just a show. She felt it was always a charade in Iran. The regime had already designated its candidate, and the die was, to some degree, already cast, and there was no need to vote. She had never voted, and I agreed with her. And that's why I've never participated in the elections, because we thought if we did, we would be supporting the regime to some extent. And that's what the leader said, moreover. They said that the people as a bloc had voted to support the government. She felt that they were fooling people, they were exploiting their naivete. They used fraud. And that's why before the campaign began, the authorities had given out instructions to the police to ease up on the population, to stop pressuring the population. Coupons were given out at that time so people could buy food. So the pressure eased up. Now, a lot of the young people didn't know who Mr. Moussavi, who was one of the candidates, was. They didn't know his past. They didn't know that he had been a prime minister in the past and that he had contributed to the extermination of thousands of intellectual dissidents and political prisoners. They only heard about him when he had already been transformed, been reborn, and they were fascinated by what he was saying. Young people, above all, wanted to get rid of Mr. Ahmadinejad. Most people said we have to choose between we have to choose the lesser evil. People took to the streets to express their joy, and no one bothered them. The situation was less tense. Fight against disease, and prevent accidents, but at the same time we see that other authorities use their intelligence to create increasingly deadly weapons to kill rapidly on a large scale and more efficiently. Now I would like to make an appeal. I would like to appeal to the authorities of the United Nations, of human rights representatives. I would like to urge that we respect human rights and that in this way we help to put an end to the murder and the death that man inflicts on his fellow man. That we put an end to murders, to wars, to extermination. I hope that on the 20th of June, when we mark the anniversary of Neda's death, that we think of her. She, a person who thought of freedom. I hope that this day will mark a day when we put an end to man killing mankind.